Let me deal first of all with the charge laid by Benjamin Netanyahu, by the ADL in the United States, and by pundits here in the United Kingdom. You don't get to say that it is anti-Semitic to suspect the hand of Israel in the slaying of Charlie Kirk. Partly because you have slain, assassinated more political leaders than any other country on the earth just in my lifetime. Don't make me go back to Lord Moyne. Don't make me go back to Count Bernadotte of Sweden. Don't make me go back to the British sergeants hanging booby-trapped in the orange groves in Jaffa. Don't make me go that far. Let me just stick to my own political lifespan. You, Israel, have been assassinating people all over the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, and further afield, all of my political lifetime. You assassinated almost half of the government of Yemen just 10 days ago. You don't get to say that it's anti-Semitic to suspect you might have had a hand in assassinating Charlie Kirk when you told us to marvel at your percipience and at your ingenuity, your engineering skills and your patience when you waited years to explode every pager in Lebanon, man, woman and child notwithstanding. You don't get to say how good you are at killing, but call it anti-Semitic if somebody suspects that you may have killed Charlie Kirk, especially when there are sundry reasons to suspect that you might. And they're multiplying by the hour. When you scrubbed or caused to be scrubbed from YouTube the entirety of the episode of Charlie Kirk, when he openly states that you stood down on October the 7th, that it was an inside job, that you were responsible for the events on October 7th. Where is it? Where is it, Mr. YouTube? Who told you to scrub that edition? That is circumstantial evidence that Israel wants to disguise the fact that Charlie Kirk, formerly a slavish supporter of all things Israel and a proponent of some mythical, unbreakable Judeo-Christian civilization, had begun to turn decisively against you. He had begun to call the Epstein affair for what it is. He said, the Epstein affair is Mossad. Epstein is Mossad. He said, not me, that he was afraid that Israel might harm him. He said, not me, that the pro-Israel donors who had fattened his Turning Point USA organization to the tune of $40 million were now abandoning him and threatening him with complete financial collapse of his organization because he invited Tucker Carlson, the world's preeminent broadcaster, to speak at a Turning Point event in the course of the latter part of this year. He said, not me, that it was passing strange, that it was perfectly permissible to criticize Israel in Israel, but that he and others like him on the conservative right in the United States had to be bullied, bludgeoned, browbeaten, bribed, or threatened with the removal of bribes if they did the same. He said all of these things. And he's not alone. Israel has lost Candace Owens, has lost Tucker Carlson, has lost Steve Bannon. There is a massive hemorrhage of support for Israel on the American right. You might say too little, you might say too late, given their whole shtick is supposed to be put America first, supposed to be MAGA, not Israel first, but America first. But that's what's been happening. And there was a very real fear on the part of Shapiro and other slaves to Israel in the United States that Kirk, with his millions of followers, might go the way of Candace Owens, another conservative figure that used to love Israel, now cannot abide Israel. Might go the way of Tucker Carlson, might go the way of Steve Bannon. So, you definitely had a motive. Let's be honest, Mr. Netanyahu. It would have been a catastrophe for you if Kirk's current late trajectory over the last days and weeks of his all too short life were to continue down the road that may have turned him into your enemy. And there's lots of forensic and circumstantial reasons for believing that the fella they've got under arrest, who the governor of Utah recently, in the last hour or two, pointed out has not confessed to the murder of Charlie Kirk. Therefore, he's the alleged murderer of Charlie Kirk. There's many questions which I and Jackson Hinkle and Chris Hedges will all be probing over the course of this show this evening. But some of them are such a standout, I really should mention them in the monologue. You see, when I look at the face of the man going up the stairs without a rifle, and I look at the face of the guy, the patsy, who had his father turn him in, his father, a right-wing Republican MAGA donor, turned him in, said that he confessed, though the youth is now denying that. When I look at the two faces, cheek by jowl, juxtaposed, I very, very much doubt whether these two faces are the same. When you discover that the fella who we're told is the killer was receiving visitors with out-of-state plates in the weeks before the events at the university in Utah, when you look at the not one but two decoys that emerged from the crowd in the tumult after the foul assassination, one of them, Zin, a Zionist Jew, saying, I did it, shoot me, shoot me. The same man who was convicted under the Terrorism Act for falsely claiming that a marathon was going to be bombed in the aftermath of the horrific crime that took place at the Boston Marathon some years before. The same man, Zin, who says he was an eyewitness to the horrific terrorist attack on 9/11, coming under, as it is, increased scrutiny all the time. When you wonder why, in all of Utah, not even 1% of the population is Jewish. Scarcely more will be identifying as Zionist. That of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, Mr. Zinn happened to walk into Charlie Kirk's event, and when Kirk was assassinated, claim that he was the assassin and invite people to shoot him. When you consider the questions over the gun, the questions over where the gun was procured, the questions over whether Discord did display what the government in the US claims that it displayed, but which Discord denies ever appeared on their platform. When you discover that the bodyguards that were guarding Charlie Kirk were all of them involved in the most bizarre baseball-style hand signals in the literal seconds before the fatal shot was fired. When you consider the implausibility of this runt Robinson having scaled a drain pipe, changed his clothes, picked up a rifle someone had dropped for him that presumably he'd never fired before, and with one single shot pierced fatally the vital organ in the throat of Charlie Kirk. When you consider the photographs, video of somebody running with a handgun in the crowd, handgun out in the crowd, in the immediate aftermath of the event. When you consider the drone which passed over the murder site within 30 seconds of the fatal shot being fired. When you recognize that Israel had motive and that Israel had the means and that Israel had the opportunity, you realize that there's every reason to suspect the hand of Israel in this crime. As it happens, I myself don't believe that they were responsible for the murder of Charlie Kirk. I'm merely saying that you'd be a fool not to entertain the possibility that they were. Before I go into who I think is responsible, let me reiterate a point I made a few weeks ago, which some have difficulty understanding and others have difficulty accepting. I believe that to pose the United States and Israel as alternatives in anything, in everything, is to entertain a false dichotomy. You see, for me, America is Israel, and Israel is America. Israel is the 51st state of America. The Mossad is the CIA. The CIA is the Mossad. If you don't believe the extent to which these two countries have merged, then take a look at that Wailing Wall picture from this afternoon, where Marco Rubio, supposedly in Israel, to read the riot act about the attack on Qatar, about which more in a minute. Huckabee, Rubio, and Netanyahu, all of them kippered up, kissing that wall again. The abasement of the United States political class to the iconography of Israel, the never-ending subvention of money and material between the United States and Israel has effectively erased any difference that there is in these two states. Having said which, I believe the American deep state killed Charlie Kirk for the reasons that I have already given, for the reasons that Charlie Kirk was emerging as a clear and present danger to them. because Charlie Kirk was papabile. He was potentially presidential. He could have run for president against whomsoever Donald Trump had in mind to hold the fort until his own children were capable of taking up the reins. I believe that they wanted to sow such civil discord in the United States that civil war, or the language of civil war, or the legislative program to crush his political opponents in the United States was a powerful reason why they wanted rid of a potentially troublesome priest with a mass congregation of many millions of college-aged kids in the United States of America. Just two more quick things on the subject of coincidences. Do you know that the first media outfit in the entire world to broadcast and publish the events in Utah was the Jerusalem Post? And did you know that both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu both announced the death of Charlie Kirk at precisely to the minute the same time, 3:02. What's the odds on that? What's the odds on the President of the United States, 10 hours time difference away from Tel Aviv, and the Prime Minister of Israel announcing the death of an American influencer at precisely 3:02, each of them at exactly the same time? I've got to move on because I have to have time for the astounding events that took place in Doha, where there is right now an emergency meeting of Arab and Muslim leaders to decide how they're going to respond to an act of base treachery, an act of international piracy, an act of international terrorism, which Israel boasts as to having carried out. Whose treachery? Israel's treachery? Well, yeah, Qatar's been your best friend in the Persian Gulf, and for a very, very long time, and more deeply than any of the others, and with a good deal less dignity than their neighbors in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. So yeah, you betrayed Qatar. But the real act of betrayal was by Donald Trump, who left that very same Qatar dripping in gold and emeralds and pearls as gifts from the very rulers of Qatar that he willfully allowed Israel to strike with its missiles just the other day, and then took off, metaphorically, in his new $400 million aeroplane given to him as a present from the very rulers that Israel has just utterly and ritually humiliated. Much, much more coming up over the course of the next 2 hours. It's the mother of all talk shows.